So let's honor ancient Native American history in style.
Native American life was once very different for those who lived off the land. Here are 10 things Native Americans actually ate before Europeans came. Wild rice.
Wild.
Rice has played a very large part in the diets of many people around the world. Just about anywhere you go, you can get some sort of rice dish, either as a meal on its own or as a side with other food items. Rice was also important in the lives of indigenous people in North America, namely wild rice.
He'd go great with wild rice.
It was abundant depending on where the tribes were located and provided a great food source. Wild rice is considered to be more nutritious than other types of rice, providing higher levels of protein, fiber, and essential minerals such as zinc and potassium. Indigenous people used wild rice in a variety of ways, from eating it plain to mixing it with local berries and meats. It was also used to stuff game birds and made into sweetened rice pudding with maple syrup. For some tribes, wild rice held a sacred cultural significance beyond its nutritional value and was an important part of their traditions and ceremonies. Harvesting wild rice was traditionally done by using canoes to reach the plants growing in water and using tools to remove the grains from the heads of the plants. This was a labor-intensive process and often required a large community effort to gather enough wild rice to sustain the tribe. Today, wild rice is still harvested in a similar way and is considered a delicacy by many and is often found in fine dining restaurants and specialty food stores. Pemmican.
This is pemmican.
Pemmican is a traditional indigenous food that is made to last for an extended period of time without spoiling and is a convenient and nutritious snack or meal. It's a mixture of dried and crushed meat, animal fat, and fruits or berries such as cranberries, blueberries, and currants if available. The meat is dried, crushed into a powder, and then mixed with an equal amount of melted animal fat. The fruits and berries are added to the mixture and cooled before being stored. Pemmican is high in protein and energy, making it an ideal food for travelers or during times of food scarcity.
It's a real lifesaver.
It has a long shelf life, and batches of it can be kept for an extended period. The types of meat, animal fat, and berries used to make pemmican vary depending on what is available in the specific area of the tribe that is making it. This means that there are many different variations of pemmican that can be made using different combinations of foods. Pemmican is also a very important part of the indigenous culture and history. It was used by tribes for centuries as a food source in their nomadic way of life, and often used as a part of trade or gifts. It was also used as part of religious and spiritual ceremonies and rituals. Fish.
Nothing like eating fish sticks.
Fish was a staple in the diet of Native Americans who lived near sources of water that had large fish populations, such as oceans, rivers, and large lakes. Fish was also an essential source of food and protein when other animals, such as moose and deer, were scarce, particularly during the colder months. Fish could still be harvested when other animals were in hibernation and the plants in the area were not producing berries, grains, or vegetables. Fish is relatively easy to prepare and has a variety of cooking methods.
My theory is a fish is a fish.
Skewering fish and cooking them slowly over a fire is one of the most popular methods, as it not only cooks the fish but also smokes it, adding a delicious smoky flavor. Other methods include salting and drying the fish before stringing it over a fire or adding it to soups and stews. Among many indigenous tribes, fish soup was a popular dish to feed those who were sick, providing them with an easy-to-digest and nutrient-rich food source to aid in their healing. It's worth mentioning that fishing was not only a way of getting food, but it was also an important activity in the cultural and spiritual aspects of many tribes. Native American societies had a deep respect and admiration for fish. Many tribes had fish as a part of their creation stories, and there were also many rituals and ceremonies associated with fishing and the fish themselves. First time here? Then become an official BabbleTopper by hitting that subscribe button. Maple syrup.
Alright, maple syrup.
The history of maple syrup is a long and rich one, and it's played an important role in the diets of many indigenous people. While traditional maple syrup is not the same as we know it today, it was used to sweeten foods both on its own and mixed into other dishes. The process of turning sap into maple syrup was discovered a long time ago, but the exact origins and discovery of this process are unknown. Over the years, the method of making maple syrup evolved as indigenous people found new and better ways to process it. One of the earliest methods of making maple syrup involved collecting sap in carved bark troughs and leaving it to freeze. The ice would then be removed, successfully separating the water from the thicker syrup. Later, pottery was used to boil the sap, which removed the water and left behind the syrup.
It's a long process.
Maple syrup could also be refined into maple sugar, a natural sweetener with proven antioxidant properties. Both maple syrup and maple sugar could be mixed with various foods to give them a sweeter flavor. But maple sugar was more popular due to its lighter weight, and it could be tightly packed into containers for storage and transportation. For many tribes, the process of making maple syrup was not only a way of getting sweeteners, but also had a cultural and spiritual significance. Many tribes had rituals and ceremonies associated with maple syrup production and the maple tree itself. Turkey.
Turkey? Why turkey?
Turkey was an important source of protein for Native Americans, and it was initially mainly hunted in the wild. Eventually, turkeys were domesticated, which made it easier to obtain a source of meat, particularly during the winter months when food may be scarce in certain areas. Along with being a great food source, indigenous people also used turkey feathers in traditional clothing and headdresses, as well as for feathering their arrows.
Big feather? Yeah.
Not all Native American tribes domesticated turkeys, but there were certainly tribes that did. Turkeys were first domesticated for their feathers, and it wasn't until later that they were used as a food source. Early discoveries of domesticated turkey bones do not show any signs of being butchered for meat, whereas in later years, the bones show telltale signs that the animals had been cut up and used for food. Archaeological evidence suggests that Native Americans were the first in the world to domesticate turkeys. The turkey was held in high regard by many tribes, with the bird being a part of creation stories. And there were also many rituals and ceremonies associated with turkey hunting and turkeys themselves. Chocolate.
Wow, good cocoa.
Cacao plants were revered in Mayan and Aztec cultures, and both indigenous groups used them in various ways. One of the most popular ways to use cacao was to make chocolate, though it was not the same chocolate that we're used to today. Typically, chocolate was consumed in liquid form, with the wealthier and more powerful members of society consuming it mixed with water and spices, while those who were less affluent consumed it mixed with maize porridge or other food items. Cacao would also be carried by warriors or those who traveled long distances, as it was easy to transport and a great source of energy.
I prefer cocoa.
The cacao beans were also roasted, fermented, and mixed with spices to create a frothy beverage that was thought to give energy and power to the person who consumed it. This beverage was also largely used by the indigenous people during important ceremonies such as births and marriages. To the Mayan and Aztec people, the cacao plant was extremely valued and revered. While both the Aztec and Mayan people had access to cacao, it held different meanings and uses for them. The Aztecs held it in higher regard, while the Mayans saw it more practically in the way they used it. The modern chocolate we're used to is sweet, but when traditionally used by these indigenous tribes, it was bitter and more reminiscent of the way coffee tastes, without anything mixed in. In some cultures, cacao was considered a sacred and valuable commodity, and it was often used in religious rituals, ceremonies, and as a form of currency. Pumpkins.
And it's pumpkin-shaped, like a pumpkin!
Pumpkins were an important part of the Native American diet and culture. They were used in a variety of ways, from being baked or boiled to being fried. The flesh of the pumpkin was a nutritious food source that was rich in vitamins and minerals, such as vitamin A, vitamin C, potassium, and fiber.
Highly nutritious.
It was a staple food for many indigenous tribes, providing a reliable source of energy and nourishment. Pumpkin seeds were also a valuable food source, as they were high in protein, healthy fats, and minerals such as zinc and magnesium. They were often roasted or ground into a paste and used as a seasoning or spread. In addition to being used as a food, pumpkin seeds were also used medicinally. They were believed to have anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties and were commonly used to treat intestinal infections and kidney problems. Pumpkins were also used for other purposes beyond food. They were often dried and cut into strips, which were then woven into mats. These mats were used for sleeping and seating and were also traded with other tribes. Pumpkins could also be emptied, carved, and dried to make bowls or containers for various uses. Furthermore, pumpkins were also used for medicinal purposes, including in the making of a paste as a remedy for snake bites. Deer.
Deer!
Deer were a valuable resource for many Native American tribes. Some tribes relied heavily on deer meat as a staple food source, while others used it to supplement their regular diets.
Oh, you poor deer.
Deer meat was available all year round, but could be scarce during certain months. Some tribes hunted deer more frequently when other food sources were scarce. The time and frequency of deer hunting also varied depending on when the deer were at their most well-fed, such as the fatter females in the spring breeding season and the males in the fall after their summer feeding. Deer meat could be prepared in many different ways, as well as preserved and stored for later months when other food sources may become scarce. In addition to its use as a food source, all parts of the deer were used for various other purposes, such as clothing, tools, and weapons. Deers were a widely available food source for those that lived in lands where they roamed, providing plenty of meat and other resources that could be harvested and used. Beans.
Vegetarian, it's healthy, it's beans.
Beans were a crucial part of the diets of many Native American tribes. They were highly nutritious and able to grow in harsh climates due to their drought and heat tolerance. Beans were also culturally significant to various tribes, featuring in several stories and legends. They were an excellent source of protein, especially helpful when meat sources were scarce.
Pass the beans, Bean.
It was also found that growing corn and beans together made both plants healthier than when they were grown separately. This companion planting technique was also regularly done with squash, such as pumpkin. Beans were rich in essential amino acids that were not found easily in other sources, which meant consuming them regularly helped to keep the community healthier. Beans could be prepared and eaten in a variety of ways, but the most popular method was adding them to soups. Corn.
Flour, corn, no gluten, corn.
Corn was the staple diet for many Native American tribes from various regions and was quite different from the corn we consume today. Typically, this corn was allowed to dry on the stalk before being removed and then ground into flour that was used for making items such as flatbreads, cornbreads, and corn mush. Corn and beans were often grown together because of how they complemented each other, both in growth and nutrition. Corn has nutrients and amino acids that are not found in beans, and vice versa. It has been observed that the Native American tribes that did domesticate turkeys also fed them corn, which highlights its importance as corn was a major source of food for many and not something that was easily discarded.
Oh yeah, corn.
Corn also plays an important role in the stories and culture of some indigenous tribes. This specific type of corn was usually referred to as maize and was often crossbred with different types to achieve the qualities that the tribes valued most in the plant. Aside from being a vital food source and something that was fed to domesticated turkeys, corn was also used for other purposes. For example, it was used to make mattresses, and corn husks could be made into toys for children to enjoy, a practice that is still done in some communities today. Overall, corn was a versatile and essential food source for many Native American tribes. Searching for another great video? Just tap or click and smash that subscribe button and ring that notification bell.